going on, YouTube? Another leg in the journey of the K5 Trailfinder 2 build. And you can see it there in the background. We've got the V8, we've got the R4 transmission, and the mounts came in today. So, we're going to try and make all this work. Now, I have noticed one thing that I don't like about this, and that is the front servo. Apparently, I have to put it sideways in the front, so when you open the hood, instead of having a fan and a radiator and belts and all that, you got a servo in the way. Not the most scale feature, but I don't know what else to do with it just yet. So, I'm going to get started here by ripping out everything from this complete running and driving truck. And I'm not looking forward to taking that V8 apart, because I know there's a million little tiny screws just to get it open and get the motor in. So, yeah, I'm going to take the servo, the motor, transmission, and transfer case mount out. I'm going to try to leave electronics where they are for now. I think the reason, and if you remember in the other video, the K5 body set came with this tray to go in place of your receiver box, and your receiver box moved to the back, is I think having your ESC up here is going to interfere with the interior. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but I think that's going to be a problem, and I think that's why this is all there. So in the meantime, I'm just going to focus on the drivetrain. We'll worry about electronics here once we get to it. Alright guys, got everything ripped out. This is the ready to run truck. They had the crossmember glued in as well as screwed in. I took all the screws out and it just wouldn't budge. I had to hit it, and you can see where there's some glue on the sides. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, here is the V8 mount set, and well, not much to it. We've got this big old bracket here. Oop, that piece rolling off the table. A new coupler for the transfer case transmission. Looks like a new steering link, and our front actual motor mounts. A bag full of screws, and here's the instructions. Yep, none. No instructions. So the mounts I'm not too worried about. There's a little diagram you can, a little PDF on the website you can download. Actually, there's two when you look at the motor and transmission, and it tells you what screws to use to mount the motor and the transmission together, and then what screws and stuff to use to mount this to the chassis. There's nothing at all that I found that shows how to put a motor in the motor. So I guess that's my next step. I'm going to pull the pinion off for the R3, set that aside. We'll put that in the D90 later. And start tearing into this motor. Exploratory surgery, try to figure out how everything is going to work. So I'm going to start on that. Alright guys, so this motor thing's not that hard. I've watched every video on YouTube about this V8 motor, and all anybody does is take it completely apart. There's hundreds of little screws and yada yada yada, and I've never seen a video where they actually put a motor in it. And so the first thing I did, I started taking bolts out of the intake gasket, and then it dawned on me, the bottom just comes off. There's 4 screws, and then you have 4 in the front of your timing chain cover. And boom, just like that, opens up. You set your motor in. I did have to do a little fancy bending of my wires to get them to clear, and I really hope my terminals aren't making contact with the case. But I may have to bend those down a little bit more just to be safe, because I don't want to get this all back together and then short out a motor. But yeah, so that's all you got to do. It's not some grand mystery, and there's a lot to this, but that's all you got to do to put a electric motor inside of it. I've got to put some screws in there and get all the rest of the screws back in. I took out I didn't need to, and then we can get this bad boy to the transmission. All right, guys, another tip here about the motor. The pictures online just show putting the pinion, or the pinion gear on. No nothing. But once you do the next step, for you got your main shaft for your transmission with your small spur gear on it, you see how far out your pinion needs to be. And I suggest, since this is going to be held in with a small army of tiny little screws that you can't get to without removing the entire drivetrain, Loctite that pinion screw while you're here. I'm about to do that to mine now that I've got it lined up. And at this point I still haven't tightened up the motor bolts. I'm going to take those back out and Loctite them, and then I'm going to set the mesh for the gears. So I don't want them too tight, too loose, as your motor does have a little bit of up and down inside the, so it's not even touching the gear there now, inside the box itself, inside the motor. So it's getting very complicated to explain. I have a motor inside of a motor. It's like Inception again. So I'm going to Loctite all the little stuff, get the motor, actual electric motor mounts tight, set my pinion depth, then Loctite that screw, and then it looks like we're ready to make the transmission and the motor. Warning, warning! Another thing when you're setting your motor position, they tell you just to stick this shaft in there, but it wants to hang down like that. So you need to look at it dead from the side and make sure you have it horizontal with the motor. Otherwise, once you seat this in the transmission, you're going to bind your pinion and your spur and tear up something. So that is crucial that you line, I mean, I'm just eyeballing it. It's not that precise, but I left one of my engine screws loose, and I pushed this, looked at it from the side, and just kind of tapped the motor down, and then I tightened it up and Loctited it. So I think that's going to work. Once I get the motor, a couple screws in the transmission, and this is seated into the transmission where it goes, I'm going to crank on it and make sure that everything spins freely. There's no binding before we put any power on it, because I'm sure these gears aren't cheap to replace, and I don't want to have to take it all back apart because I screwed up something. So just another heads up. Alright guys, got it all together. I did want to mention in the other video, when I drove it with the R3 and that 45 turn, it was a little fast. So I got on the RC4wd website, and I believe the R3 single speed is 8.13 to 1 gear ratio on the transmission, and this R4 is 10.1 or 10.3 to 1. So it's a little bit higher geared, so I'm hoping, or low geared, I don't know. Gears confuse me. I think it's going to be a little bit slower. That's why I went ahead and put the 45 turn in the V8. So I've got this little diagram from the RC4wd website I'm looking at. I'm going to go ahead and try to put the mounts on, and then we'll see how this is going to go into the truck. One thing real quick, if I can get you in there. Once you take the servo out, I believe this mount has to come out on that back piece, and your bolt here on the back side of your shock hoops is one of the motor mount holes. So it goes something like that, or vice versa. We'll figure it out. But yeah, it shares that screw with the motor mount. So I think I have to use some of the longer screws. It came with a bunch of them, so we'll sort that out here next. Alright guys, it's going together pretty well. One little thing the instructions don't talk about is your body mounts. Get you in there where you can see it. Maybe. There we go. Now with your new transfer case mount, right where your body mount needs to go, you can't get a screw in. So I've got to loosen everything back up and put that screw back in to reattach the rear body mount on this side. The other one you can get in and tighten it back up, but that one's going to be a pain. So if you're doing this, put that in first. Alright guys, it's in. It does really move your transfer case off to the side. Your drive lines go to the side, and it moves it back a little bit. I had to trim that much off of my rear drive shaft, just the outside portion, just so I could get it on. The thing's pretty heavy. I couldn't find a scale, but it definitely weighs more than the R3 did with the motor. Obviously, you have a giant bunch of aluminum around the motor, but think that's all I'm going to do this time. I'm having some ideas here with the steering. In this Blazer body, there's a ton of space up here. Let me show you around this side. You got a lot of space out here, and the engine sets up against the firewall, and you've got enough room for a radiator and stuff, but that's where your servo is. So I'm thinking somehow maybe flipping the servo mounts to the front so they're out here, and that wouldn't put your arm too far off. You could angle it just a little bit to reach underneath there, and that would get it away from the motor so we can get the water pump and the pulley set that they make for it, and throw a scale radiator in there. Because yeah, it looks silly. I don't want to have a steering servo under there. But for now, that's just a dream, because that's a machined piece. If this was centered, I could flip it real easy, but since it's offset and it's off to this side, I can't just flip it around either way, like straight over or there, because it's going to hit the shackle. So I'm going to have to do some thinking on that, see what we can engineer up. This thing looks pretty cool. Other than having to cut the drive shaft, it was pretty easy, basic install. I mean, I hope I showed you a little more detail than you've seen so far on it. I was a little intimidated at first because all I've seen is videos of people tearing it apart, and there's just tiny little screws everywhere, but really you don't have to take it all apart to get a motor in there. But yeah, I got plastic all over everything cutting that drive shaft. And I've got some in my eye. I can't tell if I burned the inside or the outside of my eyelid, but we'll find out later. And for now, yeah, that's going to be it. Show you the bottom. You can see where your transfer case. That's going to make having a transfer case skid plate kind of a challenge. I know RC4wd makes one. This looks like stamped steel. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that. Got to put something over it because it's a little exposed. But we'll figure that out later. But anyways, I'm going to throw the body on, and then we'll come back and wrap this up. Alright, now it's starting to look like it's supposed to. That motor looks big until you put it in this body, and it looks pretty small. Don't mind my mess here. I tried to mask off the window trim and do it, and it still bled through. So I've got a little bit of black all over my yellow. We'll be able to hide that once we start the weathering, so I'm not too terribly worried about it. Don't get me wrong, I was cussing and screaming at it when it happened, because no matter what I try to do with those, unless I just use a paint marker and go around freehand, it always comes out bad. Everything I've done around windows, if I try to mask it, it bleeds. So I don't even know why I tried it. And it's about the same on the other side, a little worse at the bottom. I tried to wipe it off, but we'll be able to hide it when we start the weathering. And yeah, that's about it for this video. Thank y'all for watching, and please like, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more.